folks. Happy Friday and welcome to the Freedom from the Press podcast. My name is Jason Robertson and I'm here with my partner in crime,
Todd Peterson. Thanks for joining us, folks. And Jason, a shout out already to Kagan Girl in the chat. I love our Rumble audience, ready to go every Friday at 10 a.m. Central. Folks, thanks for tuning in today. We have an awesome show lined up today as we have to debunk another hoax, another day, another hoax. We've just got to talk about the mindset of Dems today, Jason.
Oh my gosh, Democrats continue losing their mind. Their approval ratings are down in the 20s. Like they want to rip on Trump and conservatives, but let's face it, those folks are insane right now. And before we get into it though, we want to give a shout out, especially to our Rumble audience. We're working really hard to create a great audience over on Rumble. That's where our community is. You can give us a thumbs up. You can subscribe. If you like what we do and want to support what we do. We're just two yahoos running a small digital marketing company. We do this. Not always a ton of money in it, but it's a heck of a lot of fun. We love engaging with people. We're on other platforms, Twitter, Facebook, YouTube. Frankly, those platforms censor what we say. So every week we do an hour-long show. Then we do a half-hour Rumble only because, like, we're going to talk about deportations and whatnot. If we talked about that on Facebook, Todd, how long until they would hit the button and try to nuke
I think it's already nuked. You just said the word deportations. I think the Facebook stream descended. So that's how much we can talk about it.
Right. Yeah, it is the most insane thing that we've ever seen. Oh my gosh. And I'm looking on Rumble and I'm like, my camera's off center, but it's not off center on our studio. It's the most bizarre thing ever. I'm going to adjust this, Todd. Okay. Hey, here's what we're going to start about though. This first section of the podcast. I'm going to give a shout out to my dad. My dad, who would never watch this podcast because he thinks I'm a crazy right-wing conspiracy theorist. He watches MSNBC and CNN all day long. He's retired now. And my dad always told me when I was a young man and going into the workforce, look at successful people, keep your mouth shut and your ears open. Pay attention to what people are doing, learn from it. And that's part of why I love Trump. He's a successful person. Elon, a successful person in different fields, but they're highly successful people. And like, they're the ones we want running the government. Like, hey, you've gone out, you've built a business. I mean, shout out Paul Reese in the chat. One of our subscribers over there runs Split Rock Coffee. Has Todd, Split Rock Coffee?
SplitRockCoffee.com, folks. Use promo code Todd10. There was an unintended plug. Promo code Todd10, folks, at SplitRockCoffee.com. Subscribe and save. Get fresh, delicious ground coffee delivered to your house every month or whenever you choose to have it delivered.
Yeah, and then we got Francis over in the Rumble chat too. Welcome, Francis. Thanks for tuning in. And we got Toby over on the Facebook. Toby, someday we'll have to get you moved over to the Rumble. But anyhow, you know, our government needs to have the most competent people going up and serving it. And before we even get there, we're going to dissect a little bit of kind of what's wrong in America. And taking that concept that my dad talked about, it's like, look at people that are successful, see what they're doing, have successful people working with you. If you're going to be an excuse maker or blame or whatnot, like it's never going to work out for you. And like, on this podcast, too, we are going to play a clip from a Pokemon trading card game podcast. So for those who don't know, my son played Pokemon competitively about 10 years ago. Really good. He got to the World Championship. There are these big tournaments. Thousands of people show up. They're worth like $50,000 to the winner. People don't even know this happens. And I love the approach that some of these guys take because they're just very analytical and like, hey, let's figure out what does. But they had a great exchange and I'm like, man, this encapsulates what Todd and I are going to talk about this week.
Only on Freedom from the Press do you get analysis from a Pokemon YouTube channel. And folks, stay with us on this one. This dude speaking here, you'll see him. He's going to be on the right of your screen, I think, if it matches up correctly. 100% spot on, and that's going to segue us into the rest of the conversation. But take a listen to this.
Like, it not happening very often wouldn't surprise me, but 0 times is a little bit surprising. There's not that many teams. There is a lot of potential outcomes, obviously, but like, it's how is someone not just RNG'd into a correct bracket a single time?
Well, because there's like, it's like a stupid amount of possible outcomes.
Yeah, of course, but how many people are making a bracket every year? A lot.
Yeah, and a lot of people make multiple brackets as well.
The thing is that people are probably trying too hard. They need to just like random number generator it, and that probably has a higher chance.
Well, yeah, sure. Someone could make a bot, write a script, fill out every single possible bracket outcome, and then someone would eventually get it right, I guess.
No, I'm
But-
just saying like just do one bracket, but like do it random. I guess like the one thing, the stat I did hear.
It's so
recently,
funny to hear you, dude. It is not it's so
Stat-
funny whenever it's just someone who doesn't know anything about something comes in and just assumes that
It's just so surprising.
everyone else who's been doing it forever, like they've got to be doing it wrong. There's just no way that
No. I'm just
someone
saying
couldn't
like
do it.
my thought process is that people are like, trying too hard. They're trying too much to predict the better team should beat the worst team.
The conversation that these guys are having is they were talking about an NCAA bracket, and the kid on the left, who's actually super smart, one of the best players in the world, and very analytical. He runs tech. He does all sorts of things. Kid on the right is one of the announcers at these events, and it was just hysterical because like the kid on the left's like, I can't believe people just can't make this work, and the guy on the right's like, there are so many possibilities. I ran it through AI. There's like 4 quadrillion different outcomes of an NCAA bracket, which is why nobody ever gets it right. We should pull the meme up too, so people don't tune in and see a Pokemon thing and be like, "What the heck is that?"
What did
But-
we tune in today?
I mean, this is what we're dealing with. You get the crazy liberal. I have a master's degree. I understand how the world works. Then you got Thomas. Then you got the conservative. Too much of what is called education is little more than expansive isolation. It's fascinating.
Yeah, and I love the name for this, Dunning-Kruger effect. You might be really good. You were listening to one of the best Pokemon players in the world, best for a reason, like you said, Jason, analytical, can go through everything, thinking ahead. But when you apply that knowledge, that specific skill set to anything else, it doesn't translate into I'm suddenly a genius or an expert on something outside of my field. I mean, how many times do we get these woke athletes, woke celebrities, like you're really good at pretending on screen or really good at dribbling a basketball, but turns out you don't know geopolitics all that well. Nobody cares what your opinion is. This guy here trying to educate the world, like, you guys are all morons. I will just look at a bracket and fill out a perfect one for this March Madness tournament because I'm that smart and you guys are all that dumb. But does that sound like the political landscape, folks?
It is. And sometimes too, like people just obscure facts. I was talking to my wife this morning. I was on the Twitter and people are railing about, oh, they're going to steal my Social Security. And we've broke this down 100 times. So I apologize if I regurgitate it. Folks, all the money I, as a 50-year-old, have paid in since I was 16 to Social Security is gone and has been spent. All that money's gone. If you're currently drawing Social Security, you are getting that money from me and other people and Todd and other people that are working. When I retire and start drawing Social Security in 15 years, if it's there, I am requiring my kids and my grandkids to pay for Social Security. There is no money to give back. The money's already been spent. It's already been gone. And it's like Azul in the clip saying like, well, why can't somebody figure this out? Well, there's 4 quadrillion examples. Like, you're never going to get it right. And for us, I'd say, you know, when you take on a topic like Social Security, there's all these uninformed people that are saying things that aren't even remotely accurate or possible or that sort of thing. And like, I probably spend too much time arguing with them on Twitter. It's like, yeah, the money's gone. What are we going to do? Like, how long are you going to look at your kids and grandkids and say, yeah, you got to give me 15% of your paycheck to pay for my retirement? I mean, if that's what you think's right and the government promised, like, hey, I'm good with that, but let's at least understand what we're doing.
Yeah, I mean, number one, if you're on Social Security right now, this is not a rant against you. You played the system, you played the game as you were told, you paid in before, you're collecting money now, no issue there. I mean, Jason, I've been a proponent of sunsetting the program for a long time now. Just make up a number 50, 45, 40, 35. I don't care what it is right now. Just say if you're younger than this age, you don't get anything, plan accordingly. And for all the folks out there that are like, I trust the government to manage my money. I mean, do we need to talk about Doge again and understand that, no, they mismanage your money? And do you want to talk about how much more money you would have made if you took that 15% and saved it on your own instead of handing it over to the government, where the return on that investment is paltry, non-existent? And just to punctuate your point, Jason, about the money being gone, it's instantaneous, folks. As soon as Jason and I write a check to the government every month and pay taxes, that money instantly goes out to the recipients of Social Security. It's not there for a year, 5 years, 10 years. It's not waiting for you. It is gone the moment it comes in. It is just a form of massive redistribution. And shout out to Rumble Crowfields. Crowfields tuning in saying good morning from North Carolina, where he is not surrounded by these Dem voters who, as our title says, have never met a hoax they didn't believe. Surrounded by Republicans. It sounds like a great place to be right now.
Oh my gosh, Crowfield's kind of like us. We're both from Minnesota, and we live in kind of red areas. We're still kind of on the edge of the heavy blue area. So the big, like Twin Cities, very blue. You get out where people actually do work in the, in the suburbs and whatnot, it gets redder and redder. You get out in the country, really red. California is fascinating like that. When we talk about Social Security too, Francis with a great comment, if the government is involved. And it's funny. We even had Betty over on the Facebook. Social Security do not support you. You have to prepare ahead of time. So I ran the numbers just because I'm kind of a nerd and I like to figure this out. And I was plugging it into some AI calculators. And so people don't know 6% of your pay goes to the government for Social Security. Your employer pays 6%. So if you've ever run a company, you pay 6% too of their pay to the government. So instead of giving it to the employee, you give it to the government. So that's 12%. If you take an average 25-year-old and they took 12% of their income and put it, instead of giving it to the government to waste it, all the overhead, but if they took that 12% and invested it, and they just received normal salary increases, like cost of living 3% increases over their lifetime, and they invested in like the stock market with an average rate of return. Todd, at 65, when they go to retire, can you guess what the calculator said they would have?
I'm going to say like $5 million, Jason.
Between $3 and $6 million.
Good Lord.
Yeah. So think of that, folks. If you are on retirement right now and you're sitting there getting your $1,500 or $1,200 from the government, if you would have said, I'm just going to invest that money, I'm going to throw it in a 401k, I'm going to just ride it out with the market, you would be retired, and at 65 you would have had $3 million to figure out how you're going to get through the rest of your life. Now, the Democrats' view is you would never be smart enough or disciplined enough to do that. Like, you need to also pay for somebody else's retirement. And there's a place for that. Like, we're not heartless. Like, we believe in charity and helping those less fortunate. But at the same time, Todd, like, what happened to Americans being responsible for themselves?
Yeah, well, the government squashed that innate drive that human beings have to be self-reliant. But to Betty's point, too, just to kind of, again, comment on yours there, Jason, Social Security does not support you. Imagine that. You're here thinking Social Security is a good system if you're a Democrat voter. And as Jason just pointed out, if you're on Social Security, you're getting a paltry $1,500, and you could have been sitting on a nest egg of millions, and you could have done whatever you wanted with that. And they're going to make the case that we need Social Security and it's good for people. They have robbed you blind for your entire working life. And yeah, if you choose not to retire, that is on you. But if you chose to retire, you are a multi-millionaire just through saving and interest.
Yeah, and like I say, I based the calculation on somebody making $65,000 a year with just normal performance increases. That doesn't count if you continue like ramping up or get promotions or make more money or any of that sort of stuff. I mean, over the course of most people's career, you're going to get more than a cost of living increase. But and just think of all the overhead, all the waste, all the ridiculousness in government. And it's funny because even like my wife and I, when we built our retirement plan, Social Security is just gravy. We're like, if it's still there and we get any money, like, God love us, but I don't think it'll be there.
Yeah, I have no idea, Jason. I want to go back to the video.
Oh, hey.
At this point, I know we're focused on Dem voters today, and I love the comment on Facebook. Facebook's got all the comments about our Dem voters here, calling some ignoramuses. I think we got lunatics in here. I think there was the R word in the comments. I don't know if we can pop that up. But then you think I always think like an AOC. AOC polling at the top right now, representing the values of the Democrat Party, saying that we need to fart harder in a hilarious clip. But she's up there. You got these communists saying, Communism's never been done correctly. Look at me. I'm a former bartender. I'm 30 years old. I know how to make communism work. I'm smarter than everybody that came before me. These founding fathers didn't know how to build a successful country. I'm going to reimagine America because I'm that smart. Like, the hubris involved in this mindset is out of this world.
Well, and it's funny because that, another story I'll tell from my week. Sometimes when Todd and I get on here, it just feels good to talk to normal people in the audience and just share these stories. So I'm working with the kids. Kids are working for a big company at a distribution center, and they hate their job. And they just had a grandbaby, and we're like, okay, one thing I want to give the kids is I want to let them not spend the next 20, 30 years working for some soulless corporation. It's going to throw you away. Let's teach you to be an entrepreneur. Let's figure out a franchise. Let's figure out your own thing you can do. And it's interesting when I sit down with them because they're left leaning. They think I'm the crazy, conspiracy Republican, dumb conservative. And it's like I talked to them about the corporate world where I went from like an entry level associate to a regional director over 20, 30 years. And then we started our own business, and Todd, we're doing really well in the business. And I'm sitting down with them like, hey, let me offer you some advice. And here's what we do. And they just, oh, you got it all wrong. You don't know what you're talking about. You're like, what about this? Or, I mean, I had one of them who was telling me like how we were doing, like how really digital marketing works. I'm like, we started at zero 3 years ago. We invested a bunch of money to build a digital marketing company. We paid off all our debts. Now we're all making a really good living. And you're going to sit here who's done nothing, who's never made one nickel in the digital space, and you're going to tell me how to do it right. But it's that leftist mentality. They think they're smarter, and they think they're morally superior to you, which is tough because not only are they smarter and they know more, but they're also a better person.
Yeah, and that's always a fascinating conversation because then you ask them, well, where do your morals come from? And they'll always tell you, I don't believe in God, whatever, like we're just here. And it's like, well, how do you even make a moral argument when you don't base your morality on anything larger than yourself? Like, your morality is just your opinion at the end of the day. It's all absurd. Nothing about what Democrats believe, think, or say makes sense anymore. Yeah.
Right. Oh, yeah. Millions of people dead collecting Social Security. And don't even get me started about the waste and fraud. How many people are on there that shouldn't be? And we got Fally over here on the Facebook. Fally forgets you got to find us on Rumble, Fally. Like, we miss you on the Rumble channel. You're going to say something on Facebook, and you're going to get in trouble. I'm just saying.
Yeah, I got to say this one more time, Jason. I say it in every video I make that we post on Rumble at the American Tribune, every podcast I do on the American Tribune Live with Todd Peterson, Tuesdays and Thursdays. I'm going to say it here again. The biggest thing for me of everything that Democrat voters have believed is that Donald Trump and Elon Musk are the bad guys because they're exposing all of this corruption right now. For every single hoax we're going to cover, we're going to talk about the Signal non-scandal today a little bit, break that story down for you folks so you understand what's actually happening. But the fact that there are Democrat voters out there that are mad at Donald Trump and Elon Musk, not just believing the propaganda, but then not like thinking for themselves, like, is this true or is this real or should I think this way in the first place? But they're mad at them for exposing the corruption. How are you a Democrat voter and you're basically saying I'm okay with the corruption? Because you have two options. Either I want it exposed or I don't want it exposed. I just can't. This for me is like the story of all stories about Democrat voters.
It is. And it's funny that you say that because there was a time where we all agreed that government was corrupt and fraud and waste. But now you have all the Democrats, because Donald Trump said it, and they brought on Elon Musk, that suddenly that's all a lie. Like, there's no fraud, there's no issue, blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, you have got to be kidding me. Like, when did we lose that? And then I got to say, if you look at the government as a whole, whether you're conservative or Democrat, you just say, okay, the government has done a really poor job in my lifetime. We're more broke. We're less secure. There's more bureaucracy. Government has not improved. So if you take guys like Donald Trump, like Elon Musk, and say, okay, here are guys that have actually been some of the most successful Americans in, different fields. How on earth can we not give them a chance to try to improve that? And like Elon Musk, the guy builds the best electric car in the world. He builds, he has Starlink that can get internet service in the Himalayas. He owns the biggest satellite network in the history of mankind. He is better at sending rockets to space than NASA. And you're telling me we have nothing to benefit from this man helping out government. It's crazy.
None of it makes sense. Hey, Jason, special shout out to a comment from X. We don't get these a lot. Welcome aboard, Gift with God. All things are possible. Yeah, they were paying dead people Social Security money ever since 1968. I don't know if this story got debunked, Jason, because I know Trump was out there for a while saying you had people like 350 years old, like older than the United States is as a country. I don't know if that's true or not, but I believe it. Honestly, yeah, there's so much fraud with dead people. I mean, just the fact that illegals are collecting this and we're incentivizing them to come here. We want to pay them to come here and stay here and eventually get naturalized by a Democrat. By the way, Jason, speaking of that, I think it was, what was his name? He's a Florida representative. He just introduced a bill saying if you're an illegal immigrant, you will never be allowed to be naturalized. How are we not? It's not a law already, but yeah, if you want to self-deport, come back in the right way, become a citizen, I can live with that. I'd love the answer to be zero. Like, let's just not have any more immigration for a while. But yeah, good things happening. Good things happening. But yeah, you should be mad if you're a Democrat.
Right. But you know, I think the next video clip we got to play is Real Scott Adams, one of Todd and I's favorite podcasts that we listen to is Scott Adams. We both listen to him independently of each other. It was funny one time we were talking and we're like, oh, you listen to him too? And Scott Adams, I think, has come up with the greatest solution to the problem that we currently have with Democrats, their hoaxes, and all this insanity.
So now that we know that the big problem was the imaginary concern of what could have happened but didn't happen, I've suggested that Trump should create a Department of Imaginary Concerns, and it would be only to handle Democrat complaints. And the new department could have imaginary policies to combat the imaginary concerns. So you would place things like climate change in there. Climate change, at least the crisis part of the climate change. You put the Russia collusion thing in there. You put the Houthis could have found out by hacking signal in there. You put Trump might steal your democracy in the imaginary concerns department. That Musk might steal our social security numbers. That you put that right in the Department of Imaginary Concerns, and that there might be a constitutional crisis. Yep, that's the Department of Imaginary Concerns. Now, I'm not completely serious about this, but just think how funny it would be if every time one of these hoaxes comes up and Trump is asked about it, he says, "Oh, I've delegated that to the Department of Imaginary Concerns." But are you trying to steal our democracy? You know, that's a perfectly good question. So I've delegated that to the Department of Imaginary Concerns. Did you agree with Putin to have sex with him if he stops the fighting? Well, no, but I'm gonna assign that to the Department of Imaginary Concerns, and we'll come up with an imaginary policy to make sure it doesn't happen again.
This is one of the best clips we've seen in quite some time. It's absurd. It's funny because absurd, but it's also funny because it's true. Like, this is what our political conversations are nowadays. Just imaginary concerns, hoaxes left and right. I hope Trump takes this seriously. I want to see this actually happen.
Yeah, I love Scott Adams. When I listen to that, I'm like, oh my God, that nails it. Like, I don't, for those who don't know, Scott Adams is the writer of Dilbert. If you remember the Dilbert comic series, he got in a little trouble for talking about race that we could talk about on any platform but Rumble. But anyways, it was funny because my wife and I just a few days earlier were talking about like all these Democrats screaming about you pick the thing, climate change, global warming. Everybody is more worried about what could happen than what is happening or did happen. So, like Trump's talking about, hey, let's do tariffs instead of letting tariffs work out, see how it works. Say, hey, a smart businessman's making this decision. Let's give it a shot. You get all these people screaming like, oh my God, you know what could happen? This could happen. That could happen. The other thing could happen. Meanwhile, when Joe Biden, every month our prices went up 3% and it was 20-30% compounded. So all your prices went up 30% over a couple of years. Not a peep. Not like, hey, you know what they're doing. What actually happened is this result has been horrible. Nobody cared on the left. but like all these fake imaginary what ifs. And this is probably where we should transition to the Signal situation, Todd. Do we talk Signalgate?
Let's do Signalgate. I don't want to. Actually, I do have some comments on Signalgate. So long story short, I use Signal, by the way. I'm like, okay, I'm using an app that JD Vance and Pete Hegseth are on. Like I'm on the right direction here. So I've got it on my phone. It works great. I have no concept of like what encrypted end-to-end means, or if it's true, or if the government can still access my conversations if they really wanted to. So I don't know anything about security. I just go with what they tell me. But if the story is to be believed, you've got high-level officials in the Trump administration communicating on this encrypted app end-to-end, and they are discussing their war plan in Yemen with the Houthis. They're trying to figure out how do we ensure safe shipping lanes. And I am completely anti-war, but Jason, I got to be honest, if we're discussing how to make shipping lanes safe, I am fully on board with a response, a military response in this case. How about you guys just don't interfere with the shipping lanes with the violence? And the story goes that an Atlantic journalist somehow ended up on this thread. Somehow you have some woke journo, not affiliated whatsoever with the Trump administration, getting invited to, because you have to be invited into these chats, by, if stories are believed, Mike Walls is the name that was floated around by here, gets invited on there. I guess doesn't say anything, so that's what I'd like to comment on later. So he's in here, he's seen the plans. Eventually he announces that he's in there and has seen plans and seen discussions as they prepare for war, in his words. It's a huge scandal because someone could have found out about our top secret military plans. Because I know, Jason, that we only use Signal, one stream of communication, to make this entire military apparatus work. And so I think I might have missed something here. Jason, I have to plug in my computer, otherwise everything's about to die. So why don't you finish up here?
All right, I'll finish up. Well, just to add a little color to it, for those who haven't used it, Signal is a messaging app that before this controversy was viewed as the single best messaging app in the industry. You have to download Signal app. It works kind of like Facebook Messenger, to use a comparison. You have to give it permissions. You have to like send a friend request. They have to accept. And then supposedly, because this was used by the Biden administration, it's used by a bunch of politicians with their staffers. Supposedly it's the most secure thing. If you look at the messages with the Atlantic has released, all this was completely appropriate conversation. They even made reference to things they were going to talk about that they needed to do in a more secure channel. All of it was perfectly acceptable. The one unacceptable thing is that Mike Waltz or his staff member Wong added Goldberg to the chat. It was the only thing that was wrong with any of this, was that Goldberg got added. And some are saying Waltz did it. Some are saying Wong did it, who's his chief staffer. There's been breakdowns on both. And let's not forget, the military operation was 100% successful. 100%. Like, whether you thought it was a good one, thought it was a bad one, it worked out really well. Like, we got in, we got done what we needed to, no loss of lives. So all the Democrats now are screaming about what could happen. Pete Hegseth needs to resign, blah, 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 blah. Meanwhile, none of them are saying, how did Goldberg get added? Who added him? That person should be fired or thrown in jail. Like, that is the conversation. But they're screaming for Hegseth to resign for successfully running a military operation. I'm old enough to remember when we left Afghanistan, and it was the biggest debacle ever. We left hundreds of millions of dollars worth of equipment. 13 service members died. God rest their soul. It was a complete disaster. Not one of these Democrats called for any accountability to happen for anybody for an actual negative thing. So back to the Department of Imaginary Concerns, which I love. We are going to move to remove people who successfully ran an operation because there was a messaging app somebody got added onto that they couldn't have. And what could have happened? Oh my God, the Houthis could have found out. And nobody's asking the question how he got added. And they want to fire people who successfully executed a mission when it's their side and somebody fails. Somebody craps a bet. How many embassies got taken over in the Biden administration? Nobody lost their job for an actual, tangible, real world event, but they want to fire people over, even the wrong people. They want to fire the wrong people over a successful military operation. Oh my gosh. Oh, Todd, you're muted. Giddy
We're back.
up.
Yeah, I just want to add this as well, Jason. So the whole conversation around how sensitive information could have gotten out there, what no one is really talking about is the fact that this journalist Goldberg from The Atlantic never really said anything for a while. Like, if any information was going to come out, it would have been him leaking it to the media earlier, to Yemeni authorities. If it was such a risk, why didn't he say right away, oh, hey guys, it looks like you added me to the wrong group chat. I'm not supposed to be here. He didn't do that. He stayed, he listened, he learned. And then when he had enough dirt, then he decided to publish these texts and make this story happen. As far as I'm concerned here, he knows he's not authorized. He stays there anyways. I want to see accountability, not for Pete Hegseth. I mean, certainly whoever invited him in the chat, huge blunder. They got to go. This dude Goldberg, though, put him in prison as well. Like, you are basically sneaking into this government. You're not authorized to be there. He didn't say anything when he could have and should have. Not enough people are talking about that angle.
Well, and just to give context too to Goldberg, the first major story he broke was weapons of mass destruction in Iraq, which was what predicated the first Iraqi war. Hey, Todd, did they ever find weapons of mass destruction?
I'm still waiting to hear back on that WMD story, Jason.
Yeah. Then he was the one that broke Russia, that was deeply involved in Russiagate. Then he was the one that came up with the Trump calling service members suckers and losers. And then he came, I think him or the Atlantic was involved with the Russian bounty on American troops. Every hoax Democrats have fallen for in the last like 6, 7, 8, 10 years, he has either started or been a pivotal part of. And nobody finds this odd. And Todd made an excellent point. Folks, let's live in an alternate reality a little bit. Let's say Kamala won the election. Let's say the same signal situation happened between her staff, which, by the way, the entire Biden administration used Signal for messaging each other. Like, this has been
I don't
proven.
think anyone has an issue with Signal being used, except right now because it's convenient. Yeah, but Signal is not the problem here.
Yeah. Like the intelligence agency said, yeah, go ahead and use Signal. They communicated with it. But let's say it was Signal and Peter Doocy ended up on the chat. And when he ends up in the chat, he doesn't say, hey, guys, I don't think I'm supposed to be here. I'm concerned about national security. Like, maybe whoever's adding people should check. But he stays on there for several days or weeks. We don't know exactly how long. And then after the event happens, instead of reaching out to the administration like, hey, this is bad, they go to publish a salacious story. If that would have happened with Kamala Harris as president and Peter Doocy it was Doocy instead of Goldberg, Peter Doocy right now would be sitting in a Washington, D.C. jail.
100%.
He would be, I mean, he's probably up on treason charges.
Absolutely. Honestly, Goldberg should be brought up on treason charges. You didn't say anything. You did this to go after Trump. Hey, let's say a secret gets out. How do we know it wasn't Goldberg that would have leaked anything to some bad guy around the world too? Yeah, this whole story stinks.
Yeah, and like I say, and in the chats, a lot of people are throwing around different ideas. We got Crowfields. Crowfields is chatty. I like having Crowfields over in the Rumble world.
I like a busy
FBI has keys or password to the Signal account. Yep. Goldberg equals Snake from Francis.
Yep.
Fally, like I said, there's a mold in Trump leaking information. I think, I could throw on the tinfoil hat. The intelligence community installed Signal apps on all these phones. They were government devices. I wouldn't put it past them to be doing shenanigans. I wouldn't put it past Wong or Waltz or somebody in that group, covertly adding Goldberg to the chat, either accidentally or intentionally. Like, I think all that's on the table, which is why the only relevant fact to me for the Signal gate is, one, who put it on the phone or who added Goldberg, two, why or how did they add Goldberg? Other than that, anybody saying anything else like, or like so-and-so needs to resign or this needs to happen or that needs to happen, like, they're all lying to you. Those are the only two relevant facts.
Yeah. In my mind, I have added people mistakenly to group text before. If it auto-populates and maybe this individual, I'm being very generous here. This is maybe what happened. You have someone accidentally add him because they're typing in a number or a name, and he's got a couple guys named Goldberg as a phone because, well, there's a comment in Facebook that I won't pop up, but maybe it was an accident. That being said, this is a big accident. Number two, you have the possibility of a mole, like Fally commented. Someone in Trump has done a great job. Not many leaks. Very clean house. Very good people around him. But he's in Washington, D.C. It only takes one mole in the entire Trump team. So do I believe that that's a possibility? That's a possibility as well. Jason, you mentioned the idea of the security apparatus, the intelligence community over there, maybe having a hand in this as well. We know the cushy relationship between intelligence and media. So a lot of it's on the table, and I think you'd be able to figure it out. You could go back in the code and the history on the app and be like, hey, who added this number here? What phone number did that belong to? Like, I think we'll get to the bottom of this. At least they will. I don't know if it's the public will ever truly find out.
Well, and that's the fascinating thing too, which, I mean, to give us a shameless plug, that's why podcasts like us and other people you know and trust are really important. And they're important to share things, and it's important to hit the comment button, help us beat the algorithms, all that sort of stuff. Because like on here, like we talk Social Security, we talk Signal Gate, we're presenting just common sense information, questions everybody should be asking. But if you turn on the mainstream news right now, they're just lying through their teeth. They're throwing out all these imaginary concerns and what about this and what about that? And if you're somebody on the left, like you are being spoon-fed fake news, false information, incorrect spins, and because you think you're smarter than everybody else, morally superior to everybody else, you are unable to process the fact that you might be wrong, and you aren't even open to like an alternative fact pattern.
Yeah, and honestly, like I asked this question in my Trump hoax debrief episode, one of the first ones I did on my own podcast, but it's just like they have to understand they've been lied to one time, whether it was the fine people, Charlottesville, J6, police officers dying, bloodbath, Liz Cheney. There are so many examples. You just have to point one out to a Democrat and then ask them if they lied to you about this, and it's so obvious they lied to you. Do you see how they edited the video, or do you see how they mistook these words out of context? If they're willing to lie to you about that, what else do you think they've lied to you about? How is this not a common sense, just like, okay, light bulb went off, I'm a Democrat voter no longer, because it turns out they always lie to me. I am still waiting for a Democrat voter's light bulb to turn on in their head and be like, yes, they lied to me about that. I can clearly see that Hunter Biden's laptop was not Russian disinformation, but was in fact genuine, even though they told me otherwise. They were so convinced. Just one hoax has to break up in their minds, and they should have the dominoes fall. But to date, Jason, I have not met a single Democrat voter that has had that happen to them.
No. What hoax do we go to next, Todd?
Well, do you want to listen to Hakeem Jeffries get irritated over Pete Hegseth? Because you remember, folks, they've got to make you hyperventilate all the time. You always need to be outraged about what Donald Trump is doing.
In the middle of a fight right now.
Like we said, folks, for the freedom of the press audience, understand the relevant information is who added Goldberg, why did they add Goldberg? Because everything else that happened in that Signal chat was completely appropriate. Like, if it was all the right people on that chat, no war plans were nothing bad was shared. The only issue is who added Goldberg. And how does Hakeem Jeffries respond?
Well, I was going to add, Jason, they should have used their communications on an unprotected private server. I hear that is okay to do as a politician.
Absolutely.
As it relates to Pete Hegseth, he needs to resign or be fired by Donald Trump. We've made that clear across the caucus. And Democrats, I think, showed fight in the Senate hearing on Tuesday and in the House hearing on Wednesday. Our veterans have stood up to push back against this stunning national security breach. That's a fight that we're in right now. Are we on the sidelines? Have we been silent about this scandal?
Signal Gate.
Now, Hakeem Jeffries was a significant member in the House on the Democrat side when every embassy we had to bail from, when 13 people died in Afghanistan. Todd, I was going through the archives. Did you ever see Hakeem Jeffries call for anybody to be fired?
No, and he had no problem with Lloyd Austin disappearing for a couple of weeks due to an undisclosed medical reason. Turns out he was receiving, I think, prostate cancer treatments. Nobody knew. Chain of command had no idea. Lloyd Austin was just gone. Our Secretary of Defense, Hakeem Jeffries, was silent on that. That seems like a pretty big deal to me, too.
You know, you should tell that story, too, because that one came back up. That was hysterical.
Yeah, I think we revisited this at the American Tribune, actually. But, folks, this story got almost no attention in corporate media. But Lloyd Austin, Joe Biden's Secretary of Defense, I believe this was early 2024. So this was the year before the election, a year before Donald Trump gets sworn in. He just disappeared one day. Now, I believe reports coming from corporate media on this because they admitted that, no, he did not let Joe Biden know. He was rushed to a hospital in the middle of the night. No, he did not have an ambulance blare its sirens when it came to his house. People in his house said, you need to get him out of here quietly. And then you had no communication between him and his Deputy Secretary of Defense. So Lloyd Austin, quietly brought to the hospital by the ambulance, no lights, no media, no reports, no communication. And he's there for a couple weeks. And the corporate media even said later that, like, it was not good for a while. This dude was on bed rest. This dude was getting treatment for, I believe, prostate cancer. Again, I'm allegedly prostate cancer, but just gone for weeks. And then he comes back in front of a hearing. And Jason, the clip that we've been playing at the American Tribune, it's on our Facebook pages, video form, articles on this. Matt Gaetz just asked Lloyd Austin, you're here asking for forgiveness. You're like, I'm sorry that I didn't communicate and follow proper chain of command procedures. Meanwhile, are you going to forgive the military people that you fired for not getting the jab? Are you going to forgive the people that you pushed out of the military for political reasons? And Austin's over there like, no, I'm not going to do anything like that, but can you forgive me, please? It's just a wild story, wild clip. And no, Hakeem Jeffries never called for his resignation over that.
And here's what's funny once again. Hakeem Jeffries, dime store, Temu, Wish version Obama, whatever you want to call him, he's out there calling for Pete Hegseth to resign. Even though on the Signal chat, Pete didn't share anything that was inappropriate. Pete didn't cover any information he shouldn't. Pete didn't set up the group chat. Pete didn't invite Goldberg. Pete didn't do any of that. Oh, and Pete Hegseth supervised a highly effective military operation.
Oh, that's wild, Jason.
Yeah, but he's not calling for whoever added Goldberg to be fired, Alex Wong or Mike Walls, who they're probably the moles if there's a bad guy. He never, when things really happen, like Lloyd Austin disappears for a couple weeks and doesn't let anybody know, like he doesn't. So an actual thing that happened, not a hypothetical, not an imaginary, not a what if, like something that tangibly happened. Lloyd Austin disappeared, didn't tell anybody. He doesn't call for anybody to lose their job. And now he's out there calling for the wrong guy to get fired. It's just so infuriating, Todd.
Yeah, sorry, I have to go back to what I said because Fally says, you mean the black guy, according to
right.
Biden. Joe Biden said that. Lloyd Austin, the black guy. And this is the same Biden, by the way. I'll never get over this, Jason. Said that Obama was an articulate black man in 2008 when they were both running for president. Yeah. Democrats, by the way, are just the most racist people imaginable. But Jason, we've got Pete Buttigieg. You thought you were done, folks, with Pete Buttigieg, Biden's Secretary of Transportation, because he trains for 4 years. Do you remember when that train derailed in East Palestine, Ohio, and your transportation secretary didn't show up for 10 days, didn't really even talk about it? Oh, and then, by the way, they basically set everything on fire, releasing toxic fumes into the air when they didn't need to do that. They could have contained it a lot differently, but no, let's just set it on fire because it's a mega community. Pete Buttigieg came back to CNN and he said, if it were me in this situation, I would be in prison. So Pete Hegseth needs to be fired. Pete Buttigieg, folks, here we go.
Someone should be fired over this?
Absolutely. I mean, if I made a mistake like this as a lieutenant, I would be probably not just fired, but probably indicted and tried and maybe in prison. And the idea that, you remember, that these guys love talking about merit, right? We hear a lot about this alleged principle that they're hiring people on merit. I think, there's some questions there. I mean, our current Secretary of Defense hadn't shown a lot of evidence of, running a large organization, or let alone running a large organization well. And he got put in charge of the largest organization in the United States of America and the most important organization in the world, which is the U.S. Department of Defense. And if there's not accountability for a screw up like this, especially from a president who used to fire people every day on television for sport, what are we even doing?
I don't think you need to recap why Pete Hegseth is not involved in this scandal, but again, he is the focus. He's the focus of all these folks.
And I gotta say, and shout out to Betty over on the Facebook, Pete needs a medal. 100%. I was a Pete Hegseth fan when he was on Fox. I love the fact that it's a rank and file service member put in charge of the military. I love the fact he's getting rid of DEI and woke, getting back to merit-based. I love the fact that he's focusing on lethality for our military, because I think our military should all be about ending situations they get involved with as quickly and violently as possible. That's it. That's the only reason we need a military. We don't need equity or whatever. We need to build the best fighting force in the world. I need like all that stuff. And the fact that Pete is the one guy they're going after out of all the guys on this chat, this only reinforces that Donald Trump made the exact right decision when he put Pete Hegseth in charge of that. The more you attack him, the more I'm like, because I was really convinced that he was the right pick, but I'm even more convinced now.
Yeah. And I love Dee joining the chat. Here comes the Rumble community, but yeah, we lost Lloyd for like 10 days. You got it, Dee. Man. Okay,
now,
Jason.
Can we go back and play a part of this clip? I apologize, audience, but I want to make a different point too that Pete Hegseth does, or that Pete Buttigieg does, if you start in the middle. So right now, the Democrat Party is looking for who's going to run in 2028. Right now, part of the reason the Democrat Party is so awful and has such bad results, they don't know who the leader's going to be. Obama's kind of nuclear. Joe Biden, they can't touch. Nancy Pelosi, she's 1,000 years old. So they're floating all these people. They're floating AOC. They're floating Jasmine Crockett. They're floating Pete Buttigieg. Pocahontas wants to get back up there. Like all these people they're trying to jockey for position to see who's going to be the charge. Hakeem Jeffries probably going to try to play the black angle. Like, oh, vote for me, I'm black. Like all this is going to happen. But they're going to try to make a thing out of Pete Buttigieg because he actually did better than Kamala in 2020 when he ran for president. But Pete Buttigieg, he went to academia. He served in the military. Thank you for your service to the country, Pete. And then he was a mayor of a small town that was known for getting exactly 0 things done. Nothing. They couldn't even fill the potholes. And somehow this guy, because he's gay and because he's articulate, they're trying to put him up. But listen to how he dissects Pete Hegseth, what Pete Hegseth's resume is.
Right? We hear a lot about this alleged principle that they're hiring people on merit. I think, there's some questions there. I mean, our current Secretary of Defense hadn't shown a lot of evidence of, running a large organization, or let alone running a large organization well. And he got put in charge of the largest organization in the United States of America and the most important organization in the world, which is the U.S. Department of Defense. And
So now when Pete Hegseth declares he's running for president, Todd, we got to save this clip, because when Pete Buttigieg says he's running for president in like 40 days or 6 months, do you think he's going to have that same perspective about like he shouldn't have been in charge of the military because he's never done anything successful?
Yeah, it's almost like you shouldn't have been in charge of the transportation department with your background. Your qualifications were gay and liking trains. But Pete Hegseth, served, knows what he's doing, clearly demonstrating capability. I look at his tenure as the defense secretary. Things are going pretty well over there. But Jason, honestly, I'm surprised Pete didn't run this year, which makes me honestly think he will run in 2028. And then you've got the side-by-side of him and Vance, who I presume to be the candidate for the Republicans. Middle America, younger. I mean, what is Pete, like early 40s? Vance will be early 40s by the time that comes around. Like, they speak both very calmly and articulately. Like, side by side, they would have a lot of similarities. And I think that would be the appeal for the Democrats to run him, because he could maybe siphon off people that are like, JD Vance, this is what JD Vance does so well. And, oh, well, I guess Pete does it too. And he's gay, and we need a gay president.
Right. We need the gay guy. Hey, and over on the Rumble, Kev showed up. I bet he was watching Bannon, because we started our show a little early and he's tuning in to Bannon. Kev, you got to go back and watch first 10 minutes. We covered a Pokemon podcast clip that was phenomenal. So hop back on there. But yeah, I got to say, this Pete thing, it's just fascinating that a man who's never accomplished anything, and talking about what we kind of started the episode talking about. Like, I want successful people who have done things in life. And you can make the argument that somebody like JD Vance hasn't accomplished enough to be a nominee. And like, I'm open to that discussion. You know, he did start from like really rough beginnings. He, went to school, served in the military, wrote a successful book. So he's had some degree of success, but I'm open to the argument that he doesn't have as much experience or that sort of thing. But somebody like Pete has done nothing successfully in his life. It's beyond remarkable.
Well, and Jason, I think you and I have both hired plenty of people in our previous lives. Yes, you're looking at resumes. I'm not a big resume guy. I'm not a credential guy. I don't care where you went to school. I'm concerned about what you can do right now and moving forward for my organization if I bring you on board. So a lot of that you're hiring based on the ceiling that you perceive that individual to have, which again, Democrats are wrong about everything. So of course, Pete misses the point. Could be intentional, just could be stupid because Democrats think like children. Does Pete Hegseth have all this experience managing the largest organization in the world? No, but he has demonstrated that he would be likely very successful at doing so. The ceiling for Hegseth at the DOD is part of the reason why Trump brought him on board. Pete Buttigieg, he has cleared his ceiling. He has failed upward far beyond what he would achieve in the private marketplace, but because he checks one box for the Democrat Party, you see him now on CNN. You saw him with the Biden administration. So I would add that piece too. Like, yeah, I'm open to Vance not having experience, Hegseth not experience, but you're also looking at what they can say, what they can do. You're perceiving their ceiling. And Vance, awesome as vice president. Hegseth, awesome as DOD. So I think correctly observed by Donald Trump making those appointments.
And I want to point out one thing too that K-Gun Girl is saying. So Nancy is 1,000 years old and drunk. Now, I want to put Nancy Pelosi in perspective. She is 100 years old. She is, to give credit to her, one of the most effective politicians I've ever seen. And it was funny when I was going back and forth on the Twitter about Social Security, somebody logged in with a great chat and they're like, hey, how about this? How about we take all the Social Security money and we invest it in the Nancy Pelosi stocks and just follow that pattern? The entire country would retire like multi-billionaires because Nancy Pelosi is like, there's never been a better stock trader in the history of mankind than Nancy Pelosi. But switching to the drinking thing, Nancy Pelosi was routinely hammered if she was at work, giving a speech. Like, we've made 100 videos about drunk Nancy. Nancy Pelosi was third in line for the presidency. Nancy Pelosi was passing legislation. She was doing bizarre things. Should we watch it?
I didn't mean to cut you off. It just uploaded. Sorry. I'll pause it until you're done, Jason.
Well, no. Let's play Nancy being drunk.
I'm on my way to Washington to proudly represent the people of San Francisco in Congress. I'm honored to do so, to share our San Francisco values. Thank you for giving me that.
Imagine voting for this. What are the San Francisco values that Pelosi espouses? Like, you voted for Nancy Pelosi.
But here's the point I'm trying to make, and I think this is important when you look at Democrat hypocrisy. Folks, when was the last time you've been as drunk as Nancy Pelosi is in this video? Like, I don't drink now, but in my 20s, like, this is sitting at the bar at 2 a.m. level of drunk. This is like, I don't even know if you're capable of getting home. This was when she was Speaker of the House, third in line for the presidency. This is how hammered she is, right? And this was not a one-off or anything. She was that hammered all the time. Now, compare that to Pete Hegseth. How many times have you seen, or mainstream media, or some Democrat politician brought up Pete Hegseth's drinking problem, even though there's virtually no evidence of it. He's not out hammered all the time. And Nancy showed up for work hammered all the time, and nobody on the left cared. To be fair, people on the right made fun of her, but nobody really cared either. So why all of a sudden is Pete Hegseth's drinking such a big issue?
Well, don't forget about Kamala Harris's alleged habits as well. They can all do whatever they want. Again, rules for thee, not for me. But Jason, I just had a great idea too. Let's keep Social Security and let's put Nancy Pelosi in charge of it.
I love it. Like literally, Nancy Pelosi could run in the investment programs for the Social Security network. And can you imagine? Like, we would solve the problem.
You guys got 25% annual returns for 10 years. This is fantastic. I think Donald Trump, can you imagine as Pelosi goes out the door, Trump's like, I want to tap Nancy Pelosi to head up the Social Security Fund just for that day's worth of headlines to be like, look at the Pelosi stock tracker. This is the best thing ever for America.
Right. Yeah. And you know, you brought up Kamala too, and we had a lot of fun with Kamala on the campaign trail. That chick was hammered half the time. Like, I'm convinced her prep before she went on stage is like, here's some wine, maybe a Quaalude or something. And yeah, it was spectacular. Oh, Fally checking out. Have a fantastic weekend. But yeah, Kamala was hammered all the time. Nobody cared. Nobody thought that could maybe disqualify her for being president. But Pete Hegseth, like, once again, after running a successful military operation, they want to be judgy on him.
Just yikes. We got Scott Jensen kind of pushing back on CNN. Again, you and I have our opinions about Scott Jensen. We like him in CNN. We like his clips. So it's gold right here. Let's take a listen.
And accountability.
I think Republicans aren't interested in any lectures on accountability in the military after the Biden administration. I mean, the bar for getting rid of a Secretary of Defense is apparently pretty high. You can get 13 people killed and go AWOL and not tell the commander-in-chief, and that's not a fireable offense.
I'm sorry.
He did his lectures about accountability and national security after letting 10 million people into the country who raped and murdered and committed violent acts, and no remorse or accountability.
What are you talking
no
about?
more
They
lectures.
closed the
No
border.
more lectures
I'm so
about
sorry.
national
That is
security.
a different-
This was a hugely successful mission. The decision was righteous. The strike was the exact right thing to do, and it was executed flawlessly.
He was not on that signal chain. But the idea that he didn't know about it when he was first asked about it and the extent to which he doesn't know seems rather deliberate.
If he didn't know and he didn't have the facts or he hadn't been briefed on it, what is the alternative here? To go out and make something up or to say, I don't know. I haven't been told. And my understanding is he didn't know about it. He wasn't on it. Maybe he wasn't even aware what signal is. I mean, it is not inconceivable that the president, when I didn't see the timestamps on these questions, didn't actually have enough information to comment publicly at the time on any of these matters. It's not out of the ordinary for a president to hold back until they have all the facts or all the things they need to know to make a legitimate
He
comment.
has not been briefed and he can't speak to it.
And what's worse, a president not having all the information he needs to make a legitimate comment, so he holds back in the moment before being ready to make a comment, or I don't know, willfully lying to the American people about the condition of the President of the United States, which went on for 4 years in this country by all
That
of your
is
colleagues.
totally
I love that face she's making.
Yeah, I like how she said that they
Right.
closed the
That-
border earlier.
Right.
That is totally
God.
wrong. That
What's
is
worse?
totally wrong.
I hope you read
would
all the
just
books
say
that are
Joe
coming out.
Biden.
I hope you read all the books that
I'm
are coming
excited.
out.
Joe Biden. I mean,
You guys
I don't
are
know if you're a
upset
judge.
that
If
Trump
you're a
is
judge,
exhibiting some, I want to get more facts, and I'm going to be lectured by the people who lied to the American people about the condition of the president?
Oh my God!
No way.
No, but
Not going to take it.
that's first of all, that's outrageous.
Is
That's
it?
outrageous. Yes, it is.
You
I
think
did
the
not
truth was
lie.
told? You think the truth was told?
I will say.
Did the White
and
House
I
tell
look
the
forward
truth?
to this. I will look forward to this discussion.
Do you all believe the truth was told about Biden?
Scott, do you want government or do you want your lick back? Because even if all of that happened in the past, we're in the present now. So we need a
Oh, we're in the present now. Okay, we can just ignore all of that. That's good to know.
And actually, this might be a great place to stop as we switch over to Rumble. We started this episode talking about how Democrats are more worried about this potential imaginary negative outcome that could happen and willfully ignore negative consequences and actions that did happen. Pete Hegseth ran a successful military operation, but because somebody else added Goldberg to the chat It could have went bad. He needs to be fired. Meanwhile, Lloyd Austin ran a debacle of a Afghan exit and their demand, and they didn't care. And they don't even want to talk about it. We don't want to talk about what actually happened. No. We need to not talk about what actually happened. We need to talk about theoretically what could happen. And it comes back to that first meme we shared, where these lefties think they're intellectually superior and morally superior, so you can't get through to them. And I hope more Democrat voters look at this and say these people speaking for us are beyond ridiculous.
We can only hope, Jason. That's why we do this podcast, folks. We encourage you to share it with your Democrat voting family members, friends, neighbors. We're nice guys. We haven't had any trolls for a couple of weeks, Jason, so it's not been as spicy, but we're nice to everybody out here. We're just presenting information, just getting the facts. So if you want to share this content with them, we are trying to change minds. You can help change minds because we cannot let these clowns get back into power anytime soon.
Yeah, and I think, once again, we're going to be switching off here. We're going to head over to Rumble. Todd, where can they find us on Rumble?
Folks, go to rumble.com, get the app on your phone. It's a little green play button. It's just like YouTube, operates just like YouTube, except it's not red, it's green. Rumble.com. You can search out the American Tribune. I'm looking at your hat, Jason. If you see Jason's logo, if you see that logo, you're on the right American Tribune channel. And while we're at it, folks, just to make some shameless plugs, you can find our content, fresh content every day at theamericantribune.com. Less content at thechristiantribune.com, but we got two websites, two properties we run. You can find us on Facebook at theamericantribune.com. You can find us at Substack, theamericantribune.news, where we write about things, just like Jason and I go to Rumble to talk about what we want to. We go to theamericantribune.news to write about things that other publishers don't necessarily agree with. So you can go down some amazing rabbit holes over there as well. We're all over the place, folks. Encourage you to check it out. Whatever mood you are in, we've got content for you.
Yeah, and I got to say, shout out to everybody for tuning in, listening to us, supporting our work. Do us a favor, hit the like button, hit the share button. And if you really like what we do, hit the subscribe button. Costs you a few bucks a month, but that few bucks goes a long way. And I'm really happy and proud of the community we're building, especially over on Rumble. Just nice folks that are funding to interact with and engage with. And it's my favorite part of the week. So with that said, we're going to take a minute break. We're going to switch over. We're going to shut down Facebook, YouTube, those feeds, because we're going to talk about deporting illegals. We're going to talk about Doge. We're going to talk about some stuff some of these platforms aren't going to like what we have to say.
All right.
We'll see the Rumble folks on the other side, and Facebook, YouTube. We love you guys. We'll see you next week.